Imagine throwing a party so lavish, so extravagant, it makes Gatsby's gatherings look like, like a casual backyard barbecue.
Ooh, I like where this is going.
Right.
Yeah.
Elaborate gardens, fountains, spraying perfumed water.
Oh,
A
wow.
brand new play by Moliere himself.
Wow.
And enough champagne to fill an Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Okay. This is a party.
Yeah, sounds pretty amazing, right?
Yeah.
But what if I told you that this party meant to celebrate your success
Yeah.
was actually what brought you down?
Oh, that's a twist.
Yeah.
That's a real Shakespearean tragedy waiting to happen.
Well, it's exactly what happened to Nicolas Fouquet. He was the superintendent of finance in 17th century France. And his story is, well, it's a cautionary tale about ambition, power, and, just the fickle nature of fate.
It really is. And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack Fouquet's journey from his, ambitious beginnings to his pretty spectacular fall from grace. We'll explore the opulence of his life, the complex world of, 17th century French finances, and ultimately the events that lead to his imprisonment.
Now, Fouquet, he wasn't born into royalty.
Mm-hmm.
His family, they were, successful cloth merchants with a rather ambitious motto.
Mm-hmm.
What heights will he not ascend?
Ooh, that's quite a motto. I mean, even their family emblem was a squirrel. It was symbolizing, their relentless drive to just climb higher and higher.
A squirrel.
Yeah.
It's almost comical.
But you can't deny the symbolism. I mean,
No, absolutely not. And Nicolas, he certainly lived up to that motto. He rose through the ranks of government during, one of the most turbulent periods in French history, right? I mean, imagine France. They're embroiled in the 30 Years' War. A young king, Louis IV, is still a child. And you have these uprisings, known as the Fronde, that are threatening to just, tear the country apart.
and, these Fronde uprisings, they were essentially civil wars, revolts against the monarchy, and the powerful Cardinal Mazarin, who, ruled in the young king's stead. I mean, they really left a deep scar on French society and a lasting impact, on young Louis XIV.
So it was against this backdrop of, war, political intrigue, social upheaval that Fouquet navigated his way to power.
He faced personal tragedy, too. He lost his father, his grandfather, even his first wife, all in a very short span of time. Yet despite these setbacks, he managed to support his large family, excelled in his legal career, and eventually caught the eye of, the very man who controlled France's destiny, Cardinal Mazarin.
Mazarin, the ultimate power broker.
Right.
I bet he saw something special in Fouquet, like a shrewdness, maybe even a ruthlessness that mirrored his own.
You're absolutely right. Mazarin recognized Fouquet's potential, became his patron, ultimately appointing him to, the incredibly powerful position of superintendent of finance in 1653.
Superintendent of finance. I mean, it sounds almost boring compared to all this, palace intrigue and talk of squirrel emblems. But in reality, this position was like being the CEO of a company that's, on the verge of bankruptcy.
Yeah, I mean, the French financial system back then, it was a far cry from, what we're used to today. Instead of relying on, a well-structured system of taxes and budgets, the crown was heavily dependent on personal loans from wealthy individuals, known as financiers. It was a chaotic system, definitely rife with opportunities for corruption.
So Fouquet was essentially juggling the entire kingdom's finances on his shoulders, relying on the goodwill of these powerful financiers to just keep the money flowing.
And remember, he was following in the footsteps of Mazarin himself, who wasn't exactly known for his squeaky clean financial practices. Let's just say that he knew how to leverage his position for personal gain.
So Fouquet learned from the best, or maybe I should say the most cunning. But that begs the question, how do you convince these wealthy financiers to keep lending money to a kingdom that's constantly on the brink of financial collapse?
Well, that's where, Fouquet's lavish spending comes in. He needed to create an aura of wealth and stability to reassure those lenders that their investments were safe. And what better way to do that than with a spectacular chateau, vol-au-vent, and the most extravagant parties imaginable.
So in a sense, Fouquet was trapped in a system that just demanded extravagance. He had to spend lavishly to maintain, the illusion of financial stability,
Yeah.
even if it meant pushing the kingdom further into debt.
Precisely. It was a high-stakes game of smoke and mirrors.
But the game was about to change drastically, right? Because young King Louis XIV was finally coming into his own.
Exactly. In 1661, Mazarin died, and Louis XIV, now 22 years old, was ready to, rule in his own right. He craved absolute power and had very little patience for anyone who might challenge his authority.
And I'm sensing our friend Nicolas Fouquet, with all his, extravagance and ambition, was about to become a major thorn in the Sun King's side.
Let's just say that Louis XIV was very much aware of Fouquet's wealth and influence, and the king had a new advisor, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, a man who was as ambitious and ruthless as Fouquet, but with a much better understanding of how to play the game of court politics.
Ah, Colbert, the ultimate schemer. So while Fouquet was, busy throwing these lavish parties and trying to keep the kingdom's finances afloat, Colbert was whispering in the king's ear, painting Fouquet as a potential rival.
Colbert was cunning. He knew how to exploit the king's insecurities, particularly, Louis XIV's deep-seated fear of rebellion and his paranoia of powerful figures. I mean, remember, the king had lived through the trauma of the Fronde uprisings. He was determined to never be in that position again, vulnerable to challenges to his authority.
So even before Fouquet threw that infamous party, the wheels were already in motion for his downfall.
Sadly, yes. The party, while spectacular, was more a symptom than a cause. It played into the king's pre-existing anxieties about Fouquet's ambition and wealth. It provided a convenient excuse, a public spectacle to justify the king's, growing suspicion.
Yeah, so let's talk about this party. It's become legendary, almost a symbol of Fouquet's hubris and his ultimate downfall.
It was truly an extravagant affair. Imagine yourself as a guest. You're strolling through these meticulously designed gardens of Vaux-le-Vicomte. You're marveling at the intricate fountains with, hundreds of jets spraying perfumed water.
And then you're ushered into this grand hall where you're treated to a new play by Molière.
The most celebrated playwright of the era.
Exactly.
And after the play, a sumptuous feast featuring delicacies from all corners of the world, followed by a serenade by a 24-piece orchestra.
It's hard to fathom, the sheer opulence of it all.
But amidst all this splendor, a shadow was looming. Louis XIV, while outwardly impressed, was inwardly seething with suspicion and resentment.
I can only imagine, the tension in the air.
Fouquet, seemingly oblivious to the danger, was basking in the success of his party. He believed he had solidified his position in the king's favor, but he was about to learn a harsh lesson about the nature of power and the precariousness of royal favor.
It's a story that reminds us that sometimes the most spectacular celebrations can actually mark the beginning of the end.
And we'll delve deeper into that dramatic downfall when we return in part 2 of our deep dive into the fascinating and tragic life of Nicolas Fouquet.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the life of Nicolas Fouquet.
Yes.
We left off with Fouquet at the peak of his power, hosting this legendary party that, unfortunately for him, caught the attention of, well, a very ambitious king and an even more cunning rival.
Yeah, that party at Vaux-le-Vicomte, it was a real turning point. It may have seemed like a triumph for Fouquet, but in reality it set the stage for his dramatic downfall.
It's almost like a Greek tragedy, isn't it?
Yeah.
A man reaches, the pinnacle of success only to be brought down by his own ambition, or perhaps just bad timing.
It certainly has those elements of hubris and fate, but there were very real political machinations at play too. Remember, we left off with Louis XIV newly in power and deeply suspicious of Fouquet's wealth and influence.
And let's not forget Colbert, the king's ambitious advisor,
Yeah.
who was no doubt fanning the flames of that suspicion.
Exactly. Colbert saw Fouquet as a rival, an obstacle to his own rise to power. He knew how to play on the king's insecurities, subtly suggesting that Fouquet was a threat to his absolute authority.
So while Fouquet was, basking in the afterglow of his extravagant party, the wheels of his demise were already in motion.
Just 3 weeks after that fateful party on Louis XIV's 23rd birthday, Fouquet was arrested.
Talk about a birthday surprise.
It was a calculated move by the king.
Yeah.
Fouquet was charged with treason and embezzlement.
Wow.
His assets were seized, and he was thrown into prison.
So from the heights of opulence to the depths of a prison cell,
Yeah.
all in a matter of weeks, is a pretty steep fall from grace.
It was a deliberate show of force by Louis XIV.
Oh,
And he wanted to send a clear message to anyone who might dare challenge his authority.
Right.
The message was, I am the absolute ruler of France, and no one, not even the superintendent of finance, is above my power.
But Fouquet wasn't going down without a fight, right?
Mhm.
He was a skilled lawyer himself, and he used every legal maneuver at his disposal to delay the trial and try to build public support.
He knew how to work the system,
Yeah.
and for a while it seemed like he might actually have a chance. You see, the longer the trial dragged on, the more people started to question, the king's motives.
They were probably wondering, if Fouquet is truly guilty, why is the king having so much trouble proving it?
Exactly. And the trial did drag on for 3 long years. Imagine the uncertainty, the mental anguish Fouquet must have endured during that time.
3 years of legal battles, political maneuvering, and constant fear. It must have been, I mean, excruciating.
It was. And all the while, Colbert and Louis XIV were growing increasingly impatient. Their carefully orchestrated plan was backfiring. The drawn-out trial was actually generating sympathy for Fouquet, making him look like a victim of the king's paranoia.
So what did they do? Did they just throw out the rule book and have Fouquet executed anyway?
They couldn't do that outright. They needed to maintain some semblance of legality. So they stacked the deck,
Oh, well.
appointing judges they thought would be, loyal to the king.
It sounds like a rigged game.
It was,
Yeah.
but there was one judge, Olivier d'Ormesson, who refused to play along.
Oh, this sounds interesting. Tell me more about Dormesson.
Well, you'd think a judge appointed by Colbert would be firmly in the king's camp, right? But D'Ormesson, he was a man of principle. He believed in the rule of law, and he was determined to ensure a fair trial, even if it meant going against the king's wishes.
That took a lot of courage.
It did. And as he delved into the mountains of evidence against Fouquet, he began to notice some inconsistencies. Some of the financial documents, the very ones that were supposed to prove Fouquet's guilt, they were forged.
Wait, they were forging evidence? That's pretty audacious, even for 17th century court politics.
It was a desperate move, but they were determined to get rid of Fouquet.
So what did Dormesson do? Did he expose the forgery and blow the whole case wide open?
He was in a very difficult position. Openly challenging the king could have had dire consequences. But D'Ormesson was not a man to compromise his integrity.
Right.
He couldn't ignore the blatant falsification of evidence.
So he walked a tightrope, trying to uphold the law while also avoiding direct confrontation with the king.
Exactly. He fought for Fouquet's right to present his defense. He challenged the validity of the forged documents, and he insisted on a thorough and impartial review of the evidence.
So he basically threw a wrench into the king's plans.
He did, and his actions combined with the public's growing sympathy for Fouquet had a surprising impact on the final verdict.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What was the verdict? Did Fouquet walk free?
Not quite, but it was a far cry from the death sentence that Louis XIV and Colbert had been hoping for.
Because they didn't get their way.
Not entirely.
Yeah.
Of the 22 judges, 9 voted for death.
Oh, wow.
But the remaining 13 voted for a much lesser sentence, banishment.
Wow.
It was a narrow victory for Fouquet, but a victory nonetheless.
It seems that even in 17th century France, the rule of law and a courageous judge could prevail against the machinations of a powerful king.
It was a rare moment where an absolute monarch's will was challenged and to some extent thwarted.
But I'm guessing Louis XIV wasn't exactly pleased with this outcome.
You're right. He was furious. He had expected a swift and decisive conviction, and instead he was faced with a slap in the face, a public rebuke of his authority.
So what did he do?
He couldn't completely overturn the court's decision, but he wasn't going to let Fouquet go unpunished either. He decided to compromise. Instead of death, Fouquet was sentenced to life imprisonment.
Life imprisonment. That's hardly a lenient sentence.
It wasn't. And Louis XIV made sure that Fouquet's imprisonment was as harsh as possible.
Yeah.
He was sent to a remote fortress in the Alps, kept in solitary confinement, cut off from all contact with the outside world.
It's a tragic end to what was once a brilliant and promising career.
It is. But even in the depths of of that prison cell, Fouquet's story wasn't quite over. There are still some surprising twists and turns, some unexpected connections to a beloved piece of literature that we'll explore when we return for the final part of our deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been, unraveling the tale of Nicolas Fouquet, the man who threw a party so extravagant it landed him in prison for life.
Yeah, it's a story that has it all: ambition, intrigue, betrayal, and even a touch of, literary inspiration.
We left off with Fouquet languishing in a remote prison fortress, sentenced by a vengeful King Louis XIV to live out his days in isolation.
Yes, it was a harsh punishment, a stark contrast to the opulent life Fouquet once led.
But even in the depths of that prison cell, Fouquet's story wasn't quite over. You mentioned some surprising twists and unexpected connections to literature. I'm eager to hear more.
Well, you might recall how during one of Fouquet's prison transfers, a compassionate musketeer allowed him a brief reunion with his family.
Yes, it was a touching moment amidst all the drama and intrigue. It showed that even in the midst of, political machinations, there were still glimmers of humanity.
That musketeer, whose small act of kindness made such a difference for Fouquet and his family, went on to have a rather distinguished career.
Really? Tell me more.
He continued serving the king, rising through the ranks to become a captain lieutenant of the Musketeers and even the governor of Lille.
That's quite a trajectory from a simple musketeer to the governor of a major city. It makes you wonder how many other, fascinating lives are hidden within the footnotes of history.
Exactly. And this musketeer story didn't end there. Some 27 years after Fouquet's death, a writer named Gatien de Courtels de Sandras published a fictionalized memoir based on the musketeer's life.
A memoir full of swashbuckling adventures, I imagine.
You bet. It was a tale of daring exploits, courtly intrigue, and heroic deeds. The book was quite popular in its day, but its real significance came much later.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What happened?
Over a century later, another French author, Alexandre Dumas, stumbled upon this memoir while doing research for a historical novel he was writing about the reign of Louis XIV.
Wait a minute. Alexandre Dumas, the author of The Three Musketeers?
That's very same.
You're telling me that the musketeer who showed compassion to Fouquet inspired one of literature's most iconic characters, D'Artagnan.
Precisely. Dumas was captivated by the musketeer's story, by his courage, loyalty, and sense of adventure. And so the musketeer from the memoir was transformed into the legendary D'Artagnan, a fictional character who embodies those same qualities.
That's incredible. It's like a hidden thread connecting Fouquet's tragic story to a beloved work of literature that has, entertained and inspired generations of readers.
It's a reminder that even seemingly small acts of kindness can have ripple effects that extend far beyond our immediate circle and even across time.
It's a beautiful thought, isn't it? That even in the darkest of times, a single act of compassion can leave a lasting legacy.
Absolutely. And it makes you wonder how many other, hidden connections, how many untold stories are waiting to be discovered.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the life of Nicolas Fouquet, what can we learn from his story?
Well, I think it's a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the fickle nature of power. But it's also a reminder that even in the face of adversity, even when it seems like all hope is lost, there can be glimmers of humanity and unexpected connections that transcend time.
Fouquet may have thrown a party that ultimately led to his downfall, but his story continues to fascinate and intrigue us centuries later. And thanks to that compassionate musketeer, his legacy is forever intertwined with one of literature's, most enduring heroes.
So the next time you read The Three Musketeers or perhaps visit the magnificent Vol au Vicomte, remember Nicolas Fouquet, his story offers a glimpse into the complexities of power, the human cost of political intrigue, and the enduring power of compassion.
And that's our deep dive into the fascinating and tragic life of Nicolas Fouquet. We hope you enjoyed this journey through history, and we encourage you to join us next time as we delve into another captivating historical tale.
Until then, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those history books open.